and his family settled in Egypt, they were only 70 people, just 70 people when they went into Egypt. But the Israelites were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. By the time of the Exodus, they counted 600,000 men on foot, beside women and children, right? So how many would that be? That'd be over 1 million, 1.5 million, maybe. That's pretty good. So it says, read Exodus 1, verse 8 to 11. So Exodus 1, verse 8, it says, now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. And verse 11, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. It's interesting. Some of these pyramids they're finding, there's interesting stuff they're learning about the pyramids. That they were used like pumps to bring water up from underground and deliver it to the people. I don't know if anybody's been keeping track of some of that online. It's fascinating. And they built miniature models and proved it actually worked. They were like, they've got underground caverns where they would pull up the water. It's fascinating. And most people we never knew about it until recently.
They're more advanced than us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's something about electricity too.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I thought that they found some wire in there.
They did. There's like ancient wire.
Oh.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So it says, what was the situation of the Israelites at the time of the Exodus? And it brings out the story, paradoxically stresses that the more the oppressors afflicted the Israelites, the more they multiplied and grew. So that is, no matter the human machinations, God is still sovereign and will save his people, even if circumstances appear hopeless, at least from a human perspective. Moral of the story, the harder you work, the more children you're going to have, right? God blesses hard work, hard labor. So a new king arose who knew not Joseph. What does this account tell us about how we should never take circumstances, especially good ones, for granted? Can things change quickly? Yeah, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. When I read that, it flashed into my mind, yesterday, the World Church voted in a new president. So Ted Wilson's out. Ayrton Kohler from southern Brazil is now the president of the World Church. But I was thinking how suddenly things could change, even in our own church. And we just, have to pray and keep it all in prayer because we don't know.
Did you know much about the new president?
He's from southern Brazil. He was a youth pastor and then became a secretary. He was like in the general conference, I think, as secretary or something. So he doesn't seem to have a lot of experience. He's working on getting a theological degree from Andrews. So I hope he's strong and has a backbone and doesn't bend to pressure.
Was that
But-
kind of expected, do you know? I
don't know.
didn't know that happened.
Ted Wilson served 3 terms. He could have served another term, but the nominating committee came back with 1 selection. I don't know if that's normal or not, if they have only 1 or more than 1. So maybe. So these notes I handed out, I was thinking of a quote Ellen White brings up. And if we truly are just about to see Christ return, could things maybe be about to change? In this quote, Ellen says, the number 1, the enemy of souls, which is Satan, has sought to bring in the supposition that a great reformation or revival was to take place among Seventh-day Adventists. So we know there's a true revival coming when the Holy Spirit's poured on us. But could Satan have a false revival planned for Adventists? And she says it was to take place among Seventh-day Adventists, and that this reformation or revival would consist in giving up the doctrines which stand as the pillars of our faith, engaging in a process of reorganization. Were this revival or reformation to take place, what would result? The principles of truth that God in his wisdom has given to the remnant church would be discarded. Our religion would be changed. The fundamental principles that have sustained the work for the last 50 years would be accounted as error. A new organization would be established. Books of a new order would be written. A system of intellectual philosophy, which would include rationalism, would be introduced. The founders of the system would go into the cities and do a wonderful work. So they'll be doing something good in the cities. But then she says the Sabbath, of course, would be lightly regarded as also the God who created it. Nothing would be allowed to stand in the way of the new movement. The leaders would teach that virtue is better than vice, but God having been removed, they would place their dependence on human power, which without God is worthless. Their foundation would be built on sand, and storm and tempest would sweep away the structure. So we're not told for certain that this is going to happen, but we're warned that this may happen. Switching the guard right at a pivotal time in history. So it's something to watch and to be aware of. It's been kind of interesting, the General Conference sessions. I don't know if anybody's been keeping track of some of that. Have you? The first day they motioned to bring up discussion about the vaccination statement. And Ted Wilson got up and kind of out of turn spoke a long, lengthy time to sway the delegates away from voting to add it to the agenda. And then the second day, I think it was the second day, he apologized and said there were a few words that needed corrected. And
the document got changed underneath.
Yeah. And then they motioned a second time on the second day to again add the vaccination statement to the agenda.
That's not what you're asking for.
No. It's interesting. Yeah. Just have to pray. So Monday's the historical background. So it says, when Jacob's family arrived in Egypt, after experiencing famine in Canaan, the Egyptian king was friendly toward the Hebrews because of Joseph and all that he had done for the Egyptians. And it says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, He clothed him in garments of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck, and he had him ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried out before him, "Bow the knee." So he set him over all the land of Egypt. Okay, and it asked, what was the key to Joseph's amazing success in Egypt after such a rough start? What do you think?
God was always with him,
God was with him.
always favored him, and he was close to God.
Mhm.
And showed him mercy.
I like this quote, this number 2, talking about Joseph. So it says, Joseph's religion kept his temper sweet, right? And his sympathy with humanity warm and strong, notwithstanding all his trials. There are those who, if they feel they are not rightly used, become sour, ungenerous, crabbed, right? Crabby and uncourteous in their words and deportment. They sink down discouraged, hateful, and hating others. But Joseph was a Christian, right? Christians don't do that. No sooner does he enter upon prison life than he brings all the brightness of his Christian principles into active exercise. He begins to make himself useful to others. He enters into the troubles of his fellow prisoners. He is cheerful, for he is a Christian gentleman. When people aren't cheerful, then I worry. Because, when I see people that speak and they never smile, they're never cheerful, never joyful, I think there's something. So I was thinking this miracle of manna, 40 years, God showed exactly which day was the Sabbath. 14,600 days. He's like, this is the Sabbath. Exactly proved it. And so about 1450 BC, God showed everybody for 14,600 days exactly which day was the Sabbath with the miracle of the manna. And God's people have been keeping it every 7th day since then. So I just thought that was interesting. The first chapter of Exodus covers a long period from the time of Joseph, when his father Jacob, with the entire family, entered Egypt, to Pharaoh's death decree. Though some debate exists over the exact number of years, what matters is that even with his people enslaved in a foreign land, the Lord did not forget them. Okay. He seems to have forgotten them. I mean, they were there a long time, and it wasn't until they cried out with all of their heart to be delivered that God seemed to draw close to them and take action. And Ellen says, when we go through Jacob's trouble after probation's closed, some will begin to fear that God has left us to perish, but we start to cry out, she says, day and night without ceasing for God to deliver us. And then suddenly he delivers us from the wicked who have surrounded us to kill us. It's interesting. That Jerusalem was surrounded once. And Christ says, when you see the abomination standing in the holy place was sacred property that surrounded Jerusalem, that Nehemiah set apart to keep the Sabbath from being broken. And here these Romans came and they stood in that holy ground, and then they fled. And Christ says, when you see that, flee to the mountains. So all the Christians fled. And possibly that's already happened in our day. 1880s, we had an attempted Sunday law. They tried to surround us. And now, could it be happening again? Is the enemy trying to surround God's people again with a Sunday law and then a death decree? It's interesting, all the parallels. There was a Pope Leo in 1888 when they tried to pass the Sunday law, and now we've got a Pope Leo. Grover Cleveland was serving a second non-consecutive term. the first president that ever happened to. And now we've got Trump, who's serving a non-consecutive term, the second president that's ever happened to. They're both in support, both popes were in support of the labor laws and trying to give people Sunday off. What else? I mean, there's like all these similarities. It's crazy when you start thinking about history repeating itself. This is like the second go around to surround God's people. And we need to be ready. So Tuesday, it's talking about the Hebrew midwives. I didn't have too much to say about the Hebrew midwives, but they were faithful, right? So Exodus 1 verse 19. Is it good sometimes to disobey the orders of the king? The time's going to come. The law of the land will be, you must worship on Sunday or else. And then we have to obey God rather than men. So Exodus 1:19, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered before the midwives can come in unto them. Do you think he believed that? These women are different. They give their birth, they have their birth so fast, we can't even get there before it happens. I think he knew, but at least he didn't kill the midwives. So the bottom of Tuesday, it says the midwives not only knew what the right action was to take, but they took it. What's the obvious message here for us? Should we sit idly by when the Lord needs us? There's one place Ellen says, should we just fold our hands and sit in the devil's easy chair? And, God's predicted all this is going to happen, so we just need to sit back and watch it happen. Or do we need to be active, like helping to spread the truth and to take the mask off of the deceptions of the enemy and help people to see the light? Yeah.
Punch coming up.
Yeah. People to win for the Lord. Okay, so Wednesday, Moses is born. Exodus 2, verse 1 to 10. So it says, there was a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived. Let me see, am I? Yeah, right spot. Okay, and the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and pitch and put the child in it. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to see what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. She got paid. It's interesting. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. That's kind of interesting. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. Quite the story. God saved him from the death decree. And you see in Daniel, there's 2 death decrees. God doesn't allow any of his people to perish under the death decree. And we're told in our day, we're not going to perish under the death decree.
And his own mother.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that, God worked it all out. So the bottom of Wednesday, it says, we know only a few things about Moses' early life. After being miraculously saved and adopted, Moses lived for his first 12 years with his original family. Moses then received the best Egyptian education, all in order to prepare him to be the next Pharaoh of Egypt. How fascinating that ultimately so much of this education would be useless for or even work against what really mattered, the knowledge of God and his truth. So how much of what we're learning is ultimately useless for what really matters? What are we spending our time with? Some things you need to know for this world to make a living that are kind of useless for eternity. There's a lot of jobs that aren't going to exist in eternity. Farming's one of the jobs I think will exist forever.
Yeah.
Musicians, and there's some, but
Well, it's neat that you can be a doctor, but it'll be nice when you don't need it.
yeah. Yep. So this number 3 on here, I thought of this when I read, about learning useless information. So it says, some of us have had time to get the truth and to advance step by step, and every step we have taken has given us strength to take the next. But now time is almost finished, and what we have been years learning, they will have to learn in a few months. I think when the latter rain falls, there'll only be a few months left. Latter rain falls when the Sunday worship law is passed. So they will also have much to unlearn, right? And much to learn again. So it says, those who would not receive the mark of the beast and his image when the decree goes forth, right, the Sunday law, must have decision now to say, nay, no, we will not regard the institution of the beast. The institution, the doctrine of the beast. So how many have the backbone? We're told the majority are going to forsake us. When things really get tough, it's going to be challenging. And we need to learn now how to depend upon God and test his promises and ask him to take us through whatever we need to go through to prepare us for what's coming. If he has to give us trials now to save us, so be it, Eternity is what's really important. Okay, and then Thursday, a change of plans. If we get done early, we'll talk a little bit about some end time stuff maybe, but we'll see. So a change of plans. What events quickly transpired to change the entire direction of Moses' life? And what lessons can we learn from this story? So what did Moses do? Is everything he did godly? He got angry, right, and killed an Egyptian. Was that right? Would it have been right for Noah to kill anyone? But yet, God drowned the world, right? I mean, God could do what Moses couldn't do. Is it right to get angry? Here's a Bible verse that, it says, be angry, but then make things right before the sun sets. I don't know. God can take away anger for those that have that tendency. When I was a kid, I used to get so mad. I used to throw things at my wall. But God took that away.
Amen.
Yeah. I was pretty young back then. So Moses took things into his own hands. He killed an Egyptian, then he had to flee. How could he deliver people from Egypt when he was fleeing for his life and after killing an Egyptian? It seems like Satan wanted to step in and to hinder God's plans and to stop what God wanted to see happen. And he does that in our lives. Satan's always working against us, trying to destroy us, trying to kill us, trying to cause us to go to an extreme and to entirely ruin God's plan for our life. But despite all of that, did God still use Moses? Yeah, God turned everything around for good. So what would Moses do? Would he succumb to the lure of Egypt and to the pleasures of the court, or would he endure hardship with his embattled people? Events soon forced a decision for him. Okay, so number 4, Hebrews 11. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. He was willing to put off gratification here and now to be eternally with God. And they say, that's kind of what divides a child from an adult. An adult can put off gratification. A child, they want everything instantly and is self-centered and right. So when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So after the killing, Moses really had no choice, at least as far as remaining in Egypt. Thus, whatever plans there were for him to ascend to the throne of Egypt and to become a god, those plans were quickly ended. Do you think Moses wanted to become like that? I don't think so. Because the principles were instilled into him by his mother to worship and honor the God of heaven. So I don't think he ever had that desire. But that's what they were training him to be. Rather than becoming a false god, Moses would serve the true God instead. No doubt, at the time when he fled, Moses had no idea what the future held for him. Okay. So, Ray?
You're talking about Moses would be tempted to become Pharaoh. It's interesting that even though that Pharaoh's daughter had saved him, if you will, for the first 12 years, Moses was living in the household of his original family.
Yeah.
And so those that are formative years, that's where your character, that's where all your belief systems are developed. And so, God, in his wisdom, knew that, that was going to be instilled in Moses. That, that the Jewish faith or culture was going to be instilled for Moses. And so he was being prepared.
Yeah.
He was being prepared.
Yeah. How about us? Hopefully we're allowing God to prepare us, no matter what point we come into the truth. Sometimes difficulties are better than an easy life because it challenges us, which causes us to grow, which allows God to use us for a greater purpose in the coming days. So sometimes those that come in at the 11th hour are more excited than those who have been in the church for 40 years. So these 11th hour workers, they're going to flood into the church. They're going to be excited to be learning the truths we know. And quickly the word Moses. And they tell the story of Israel's early calling to witness to a world steeped in idolatry, revealing the nature and character of the true God, which is our calling, to reveal the character of Christ and to tell them about idolatry, right? To call people out of Babylon into the truth, call people out of worshiping an idol Sabbath, to keep the true Sabbath. Was it God's plan that Moses kill the Egyptian? No, right? But he took it into account. I think when God called Moses or worked upon Moses, he saw that that would happen and how he would work around that. If not, what does this story teach us about how God can overrule in any situation and use it for his own purposes? Okay, Romans 8:28, right? Does everything work out for our good? Yeah. By faith, we believe that. And when we have faith, then it comes to pass, right? That's kind of an interesting thing. It's a rule of the universe. Faith makes something happen.
Like blessing disguise.
Yeah. We can't explain it. I mean, the laws of nature can be suspended when we have faith. Faith can do miracles through, I believe, the angels. But faith is amazing. Faith is that in the armor, faith is so important. And we don't understand it as much as we should. So Friday, says the biblical text states that the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the male children alive. Ellen White aptly comments on the faithfulness of the midwives and the messianic hope. Orders were issued to the women whose employment gave them opportunity for executing the command to destroy the Hebrew male children at their birth. Satan was the mover in this matter. He knew that a deliverer was to be raised up among the Israelites, and by leading the king to destroy their children, he hoped to defeat the divine purpose. But the women feared God and dared not execute the cruel mandate. The Lord approved their course and prospered them. It says the good news in all this is that despite Satan's plans, God overruled and he used faithful people to thwart the enemy. We do live in the territory of our enemy, right? He's the God of this world, right? He's the father of sin. He's responsible for it. And it says Satan usurped this position from Adam, but Jesus Christ defeated him in his life and through his death on the cross. Although Satan is still alive and active, as revealed in his attempt to kill those children, his own execution is certain. Okay, the good news is that life's difficulties can be overcome by God's grace. That grace is our only hope. And that's the good news, right? We can go back to how we were before we fell. We can obey. We can live a new life. We can have victory in Christ. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, right? Without him, we can do nothing, but with him, we can do all things. Everything that he's asked us to do. We don't have to have a defeatist mentality that I'm a poor sinner and I'm going to remain a sinner until Jesus comes. I mean, we should see ourselves as new creatures, saints, right? At least that's the way I look at it. So, got a few minutes. to talk about anything else. A lot of Adventists talking about Daniel 11, verse 44 and 45. I don't know if anybody's been watching some of this interesting stuff. You know, it says tidings out of the east and tidings out of the north. And if that's literal, east is Iran, north is Syria or Russia. You know, it's interesting. Could it be that prophecy's working itself out? And it says tidings. I don't think what's going on with Iran's over with. I think there's more coming. They didn't use a lot of their best missiles to attack Israel. So I think, yeah. And King of the North, who's the King of the North? If it's literal, probably Turkey. If it's spiritual or symbolic, maybe the papacy. Could both happen? Could Turkey set up its headquarters in Israel? Could the papacy set up its headquarters in America? Because we're between two seas as well. You know, we'll just have to wait and see. But it's interesting. We're getting so close. You know, we're starting to understand the last verses in Daniel 11, which is before the time of trouble starts and probation closes. So, yeah. So Ellen talks about just before probation closes, there'll be a short period when trouble is coming on the earth. Short period, few months. Are we there? I don't think so, but we're getting close. I think we're starting to see trouble getting stirred up. So I heard somebody say the Sunday Sabbath is said to violate the first commandment because it's false worship. The Sunday Sabbath violates the second commandment because it's a false image. The Sunday Sabbath violates the third commandment because it's a false name. And the Sunday Sabbath violates the fourth commandment because it's a false seal or mark. That's kind of interesting. Well, like all four of the first commandments are violated by Sunday, the Sunday law. Can we know when probation's going to close, or do we have to always be ready? We have to always be ready, right? Because we don't know. We don't know when the world's going to end. We don't know when our life's going to end. There's so much going on. You know, Christ warned there's going to be lots of false prophets right before he comes back. They're everywhere. I go on YouTube and there's new false prophets every day. It's like, I haven't seen this one. I haven't seen that one. It's like, where are they? It's like, they're just everywhere. They're just coming up out of the woodworks. And Christ warned, this is a sign I'm about to come. There's going to be many false prophets. And here they are. And it's so amazing. And like, everybody talking about financial collapse is imminent. Texas did everybody see what's going on in Texas with the floods? There's like 24 people killed and a dozen or two children missing. And they had like 14 inches of rain in some areas. And China too. Around is it the Two Rivers Dam or something like that? They had 15 inches of rain and like all the cars and people being washed away. And it's crazy what's going on, like record-breaking stuff. And, you know, we're told that as we get close to the end, Satan's going to start throwing destruction among us. And And it's interesting. There's some lady called a Magna or something in Japan who supposedly had some kind of a dream, and she saw that this great earthquake was going to happen in tsunami. And she predicted to the very day that the 9.1 earthquake happened in Japan a year or two ago, and the tsunami. But then she said she saw another dream, and she saw that wasn't the fulfillment, that there's another one coming in July of 2025. And she says the waves of the tsunami would be 4 times higher than the 9.1 earthquake. And so, some people are like, whatever. But then now over the last 2 weeks, they've had 1,100 earthquakes in the exact spot where she saw that this earthquake's going to happen. And she got the last one to the day. So all these people are fleeing Japan. The government's evacuating the island where all this stuff's happening. And it's just crazy. There's so much crazy stuff going on. And I don't know, if it happens, it could be very interesting. Have an earthquake that big. Any other thoughts about end time events? I'm looking through some of the stuff I've got. Do you think it's close? Why do you think it's close? Yeah. The wickedness and the attempt to unite church and state that's happening right now. It's a sign of what's coming. What formed the beast was when church and state united. And what forms the image of the beast is when church and state unite. And I think it's going to take some kind of a big disaster, and everybody's going to be afraid. And they're going to say, we need to get back to God, or we're going to all perish. We need this Sunday law to save our country.
I think that the biggest one to me that makes me think that we're close is the Protestants reaching across to the papacy.
Yeah.
And push for Sunday sickness, even that little thing in the proposal for 2025.
Yeah.
That they wanted to accomplish.
I forget what his name was that wrote that. But Trump made him chief legal counsel for the Department of Labor. The guy who wrote that Project 2025 article calling for Sunday laws. It's happening.
It could be quick.
Yeah.
It could happen by 2027 sometime.
Yeah. Well, 2027, right? Ellen saw in 27 AD, it had been 4,000 years since Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. So, why not? And if it's cut short, could be next year. I think it's close. I think it's a lot closer than any of us realize. This, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this Albert Pike. He was a Freemason. 1871, he predicted 3 world wars. The first 2 have happened exactly like he predicted. The third one, he said, would be a war between Israel and Islam. And it would stir up all the nations to choose one of 2 sides, and the nations would fight each other until they were exhausted. And then Satan would appear to set up a new religion on earth. He wrote that back in 1871. And here we're starting to see Israel and Islam clashing with each other, and nations starting to take sides. And some Adventists believe Daniel 11:44 is talking about Israel and Islam butting heads again and stirring up a 3rd world war. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I think we're just so close. The first Pope Leo, 447 AD, he was in support of the death decree for heretics. Now we've got another Pope Leo, and we know a death decree is coming. It's just so interesting. History is cyclic. Nothing new under the sun. It just keeps repeating itself. That's why everything in the Bible has an application for our day. Even things that were already fulfilled, there's similar fulfillments coming again. So you have to read everything you read in the Bible. You have to be like, how does this apply to me? How is this going to happen again? So when I read Great Controversy, I take all the passages Ellen's quoting from in scripture. She'll quote something from Ezekiel or Psalms, and it's having to do with the time of trouble. So I'll note at that passage, time of trouble, Great Controversy, page number. And then as I'm flipping through my Bible, I see all these timelines of what's coming on the earth, just based on where Ellen White placed all these passages in the Old Testament into the future. It's kind of interesting to do that. See where Ellen places all these passages in the Bible at the end of time. And then you can see little miniature timelines of what's coming all throughout the Bible. So there is an interesting video about China's digital yuan failing. That was so fascinating to me because the governments want digital control. They want digital money. And China's been trying it for years, and now it's failing. Everybody's rejecting it. The merchants said it takes too long to do refunds. There's all kinds of problems. The merchants are rejecting it. The people are saying it's control. It's not, they're saying it's not a digital wallet, it's a digital cage. And it's our money, but your rules. And so they're rising up and rejecting it, which it's just so interesting. It's and it's spreading. Other nations are seeing this happening and they're backing off on digital money. So I'm thinking, what's the devil going to do? Is he still going to try to roll this out, even though nations are starting to see the pushback? Or is he planning some big catastrophe that's going to cause it suddenly to come upon us? It's, I don't know. It's so fascinating to me that it's almost like the tide is turning against the devil's plans. And so what's he going to do now? And that's right where we're at. And it makes me wonder. So, well, there's a lot going on. Pray for the General Conference. Pray for the General Conference. There's stuff coming out that, I don't know. I think the truth should come out in some ways, but need to be careful. We need to unite around presenting the truth. Just things being brought out about certain people and I don't know. I don't know if you were here when I mentioned we've got a new president for the World Church. But changes are in the air. Could be good. Don't know. We just pray that you'll develop within us the character of Christ and prepare us for what's coming on this world. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, we have a few minutes and then we'll start the rest of the